March 1991. Still attending Bowling Green State University. We've got a few books on this list from my fantasy literature class and a bunch of books by the same author that I'm just going to fly through. I'm dropping my notebook here. And I didn't bother to pull all of them off my shelf. It'd be a huge pile. Didn't feel like doing that. So a bunch of books for some reason in March of 1991. A book that's not on this list from my fantasy literature class because I had read it previously. We probably covered it at some point earlier in one of the videos. But I didn't reread it for my fantasy literature class. And that is The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. A classic work of, dealing with mythology and how it affects the world and how it's affected stories throughout history. So that was part of my fantasy literature class, and I did not read it a second time. But let's get to the books that I did read. And number one for March of 1991 was for my fantasy literature class, and that is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, the classic science fiction novel that was, of course, turned into the classic science fiction film Blade Runner, a film that I need to watch again because back in the day, I did not like it. I found it very boring. I know a lot of people love the movie, so I should give it another shot. But I loved the book. The book is great, about Deckard hunting down replicants. And of course, it's Philip K. Dick, so there's always a question of identity. Is Deckard actually a human? Is he a replicant himself? Who knows? Apparently no one, because it's still being argued to this day. But great book. Big fan of Philip K. Dick. Next up, we have Trace, When Elephants Forget by Warren Murphy. There's his name. Trace works for an insurance company. He's an investigator. And, I believe he's from Vegas, but he's sent to New York because someone has died. And, of course, there's an insurance claim. He has to check it out. And according to the back of the book, this family that's involved is worse than the mafia. His girlfriend goes with him to make sure he stays on the straight and narrow while he's in New York. And shenanigans ensue. These are always fun books. Gonna get to rereading them at some point because I dig them. And as always, I love these books with the parts of the text from inside on the cover. I don't know why. I just dig that. Fletch did it. These did it. It's fun. All right, so now we're jumping into just a bunch of stuff by Robert B. Parker. Couldn't tell you why. Must have been in the mood for it because I just started reading all of the Spencer books in a row. So we start with, these are all going to be Robert B. Parker until some other stuff jumps into the middle of it. But we start with the Godwolf manuscript, the very first Spencer book. Not the first one I ever read, but the first one in the series. Introduces the character. A manuscript is stolen from the local college. He's hired to find it. Then we have God Save the Child, the second Spencer book. Introduces us to Susan Silverman. Then Mortal Stakes, the third Spencer book. And Spencer and Susan's relationship is picking up steam. But again, all three of these, fantastic private detective mystery books. Just great. The Spencer books are fantastic. But then, for some reason, I took a break to read Stalking the Angel by Robert Crace. This is the second Elvis Cole mystery. He's a private eye. On the back, he quotes Jiminy Cricket and carries a .38. He's a literate, wisecracking Vietnam vet who is determined never to grow up. A great character. Robert Crace, great author. I felt that the books got better as the series went along. As if, I don't know if this is the case, but as if Robert Crace found his style, found his footing. Very reminiscent of Spencer, where Spencer has Hawk, Elvis Cole, has Joe Pike. And in this one, Elvis Cole is hired to find, coincidentally, another manuscript. I believe that's what it says here. Yes, a Japanese manuscript. And again, craziness ensues. Involves the Yakuza, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, Robert Crace, the Elvis Cole books, really good stuff. Then we're back to Robert B. Parker. So then we have, let's see, Promised Land. Excuse me. I think this is the book that introduces Hawk to the Spencer series. And it might be the one where Spencer proposes to Susan Silverman because she wants to know where their relationship is going, and she's kind of like, no, I don't want to get married. I just want to make sure we're serious. Then we have Judas Goat, which I don't remember a whole bunch about off the top of my head. Looking for Rachel Wallace. Spencer's hired to protect this big feminist orator, author, I think. And then she fires him, and then she gets kidnapped, and he has to go and rescue her. Early Autumn, the very first Spencer book I ever read. My favorite of the Spencer books. Not really a mystery. Spencer's hired to look after this kid, basically. He's told it has to do with a divorce. And the woman that hires him, says his father's after him. And then she ends up coming and getting the kid because she makes a deal with the dad, but it's a bad situation. So Spencer essentially, for lack of a better way to put it, kidnaps the kid, takes him out, wants to teach him how to stand up for himself, be a man, and gets blackmail material on both parents so that he can force them to let the kid live his life and be what he wants to be and grow up and blah, blah, blah. But it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. Then we have A Savage Place, which I feel like is the one where Spencer goes to L.A. I could be wrong about this. I didn't look any of these up before doing this. But I feel like that's the one where Spencer goes to L.A. to protect this newswoman. I think she is. Okay, then we're breaking up the Robert B. Parker. We have Being There by Jerzy Kosinski. And this is the story of Chauncey Gardiner. This was for my fantasy literature class. It was made into a movie with Peter Sellers. So the main character is Chauncey Gardiner, who ends up, he's like a nobody, comes out of nowhere, ends up being the heir to a Wall Street tycoon, a presidential policy advisor, a media icon. And it's absolutely hilarious. Very, very funny book. I've never seen the movie, but the book, it's Peter Sellers, so the dude was a comic genius. The book is hilarious. Back to Robert B. Parker with Ceremony, which I think is the one where we're getting closer to Susan and Spencer breaking up. I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't matter. Do you need the details? It's Robert B. Parker. It's Spencer. It's great. Then we have 3 Weeks in Spring by Joan H. Parker and Robert B. Parker. This is a nonfiction book about what happened when Joan was diagnosed with breast cancer and had a mastectomy. So it's a little memoir kind of thing, I guess. Very, very interesting and written in Parker's typical style. Then we have The Widening Gyre by Robert B. Parker. See, we're still in the Parker era. If these are in order, then this would be the one where we're getting closer to them breaking up. But I don't remember too much about it. It's a good one. They're all good, at least all the ones that I've read, for the most part. Then we have Haunted by R.L. Stine. This is the 7th Fear Street book. Don't know why I read this. Maybe my sister lent it to me. She was into all the R.L. Stine stuff. But what the hell? I read a Fear Street book, and apparently some girl named Melissa is being haunted by a restless spirit or something. I haven't watched the movies that were on Netflix, but I've heard pretty decent things about them. I'll have to check them out at some point. And then finally, back to Robert B. Parker with Valediction. And this is the one. I'm almost certain this is the one where Susan has broken up with Spencer, moved across the country. Or maybe that happened in the last one because... Oh, is this... No. It's this one. She moves across country. Spencer is sort of tetherless. And I think a girl is involved with a cult. So Spencer's trying to help, but he really doesn't care about anything. And so he, is taking risks and ends up shot, I think. Either way, again, it's fantastic. Like I said, I didn't look all of these Spencer books up or pull them off the shelves to refresh my memory because they're all great. If you like private detective stuff, you've got to read the Spencer books by Robert B. Parker. They're just fantastic. But that's it. That's the last book I read in March of 1991. But that's a lot of stuff. But the Spencer books, they're fast. If I've got the time, I can read one in a day. Easily. Quickly. Half a day. That's it. So... there you go. So yeah, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Being There, both for my fantasy literature class, and not listed, Power of Myth. And, okay, so the last book for my fantasy literature class that we were supposed to read, I did not read it. I could not find a copy. Was 9.5 Weeks. Of course, the basis for the Mickey Rourke Kim Basinger movie. I thought I could get away with having just seen the movie. That was not the case. Apparently there's big differences between the book and the movie because we had like a quiz or a test on it, and I did not do well because I didn't have the book to read. Excuse me. So as you can see, I mentioned in one of the earlier videos when I first brought up the fantasy literature class, it was a very generic use of the word fantasy. We had The Wizard of Oz, so very much fantasy. But then The Shining, so horrific fantasy. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is your sci-fi, which a lot of people, bookstores libraries lump sci-fi fantasy together. Being There, Fantasy Life? I don't know. And then 9.5 Weeks dealing with sexual fantasies. And, of course, Power of Myth, all about mythological fantasies and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so there you go. My question for this video, I'm going to go with, or be inspired by, the fact that I read all these Robert B. Parkers. So, are there any books or series of books that you reread over and over again? Those of you who have followed all of these videos, you know there are times when I'm just in the mood for Robert B. Parker, so I start at the beginning and just start reading through. I've done that with the Fletch books. Started at the beginning and read through just because I was in the mood for that stuff. So there's lots of other books that I've reread, and we're going to get to a couple of those eventually. I don't know when it's going to start, but there's a couple books that are going to pop up month after month. But is there a book that you reread a lot, or a series that you reread at least once, potentially more than once? Nowadays, I don't have the time for a lot of rereading. I've done a little bit lately. for those who watched my reviews and things. Let's see, I just reread Planet of the Apes not long ago, and an old Iron Man novel from the 70s. And I'm going to jump in here and there, just try to mix in some rereads, but I have just way too much other stuff to read. But that's neither here nor there. What are your rereading habits? That's essentially the question. And I think I've covered my answer. More than covered it. There you go. If you have any comments, questions, or corrections, please put them in the comments below. Comments are open for spoilers. Just post a spoiler warning. We try to be polite here on my channel. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronin5757, and my Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comic books, board games, and fuzzy animals, is Eric Smith 5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. That's all I have got for you. So until next time, read more books.